Hey everyone, it's Pam, and I'm here with another card tutorial for the Pajama Crafter Stamps YouTube channel. Have you or a loved one been feeling like no matter what you do, you're just failing at life? Well, welcome to the Struggle Bus. Today's card features this sweet stamp from Pajama Crafter Stamps that shows just that, the struggle bus, and a nice reminder that even though you're struggling, it doesn't mean that you are failing. So let's go ahead and hop on and see how I create this interactive slider card today. We're going to start off our card today with 4 sheets of cardstock, one which is not shown. This is the watercolor cardstock that we'll be using, and we'll be using the smooth side, a scrap piece of black cardstock, a sheet of cardstock for Copic coloring, as well as another sheet of black cardstock that's cut to 4¼ by 5½ inches. We're first going to work on the background for our card using that watercolor cardstock. First, we want to mask off half of that cardstock, and the bottom half is what we're going to work on first. This is going to represent our sand, so we're going to use antique linen to blend all over the bottom of that cardstock. And you can see here it comes up slightly. That's because I really didn't attach it to my glass board really well, so you'll see later that I use more tape to hold that down there. See, you can see it again, it moves. So now I'm realizing I need more tape. So for our sky, I'm starting off with some lost shadow. Basically, I want to create a very cloudy scene for our struggling bus. So I'm filling in almost all of the top with that lost shadow. Then I'm using a cloud stencil from my stash, and I'm just taping that down so that we can use hickory smoke as our next layer of clouds. And this video is a true representation of me struggling. Like, this card is just ironic that it's the one that I'm making for this video. So when I put down the hickory smoke, I really put too much ink onto my blending tool, so it bled underneath the stencil. So I didn't really have that crisp line that I was looking for my clouds. So I repositioned the stencil, did it again, and then it still was seeping under my stencil. So then I took my blending tool and rubbed off a lot more of the ink onto my paper towel, and then that seemed to do the trick. To really decrease the chances of it seeping under the stencil, I started wiping upwards instead of downwards. And then once I was finished with that, removed the stencil and it looked great. So then I filled in the rest of the sky with the hickory smoke. I had to remove the tape that I was using to hold my cardstock down. And then once that was filled in, I went ahead and brought in my next cloud stencil and taped that down. And then I used black soot to fill in the rest of the sky. So I'm really just trying to get this kind of cloudy, rainy, thunderstorm appearance for my struggle bus on this card. Now, as I removed the masking tape, I realized that it started to rip my paper. So that's where I kind of struggled again. So I replaced the masking tape where I had it between the sand and the clouds and went ahead and filled in those spots where the paper ripped with more antique linen. And then later I also realized I forgot to take the tape off the bottom to fill in that part, but I figure out a way to fix that later. So for this part, I'm taking gathered twigs and smushing that onto my work surface, spraying it with a little bit of water, and then using this wonky fan brush that I have in my stash to do some splattering, but not before I mask the top of my card panel. So I just pick up that ink with the paintbrush and then start tapping against my finger, and that seems to give me the best splatters. Here we go. I struggle again because I dropped the next ink pad, which is Walnut Stain. So then I just barely missed my paper. So I was kind of happy that I at least missed the paper. But I did want to show you that, you know, us content creators do make mistakes as well. So I went ahead and smushed that onto my glass board as well, added some water, and then did some splattering of the walnut stain. And then once that was done, I completely dried my entire panel so that I could move on to the next part of the card. So I go ahead and replace that masking tape for this next part. And here's the stamp set we're going to be using. It's called Struggle Bus from Pajama Crafter Stamps. And what I'm going to do is I'm taking out the bus that I'm going to use, and I'm kind of measuring where I want my road for my scene to go. So I go ahead and use some more masking tape and put that on a diagonal, and I kind of eyeball this for each side. I just put down one and then try to make the second one match on the other side. I go ahead and add masking paper to the top where my sky is, and then the rest of the sand that's on either side of the road, I mask that off as well. So here I'm using some VersaFine Clear ink and Nocturne, and a brush I have designated to pigment ink. So I do one layer of ink, then I go ahead and dry that. Then I did a second layer of ink just to make sure that I'm getting it as dark as I can. And then I go ahead and dry that. And then I do my third and last layer of ink. And here I kind of also pounce it at the end just to really get that ink to stay onto my paper. And I heat set it one final time. So here's a final look at what the final background should look like. So now we're going to go ahead and get into some stamping. So I took the one bus from the Struggle Bus stamp set, put it on my Misty, and I'm just inking it up with some alcohol marker friendly ink so that I can color it with my Copic markers. And I'm just using this tool here to kind of press it down, and once that is done I go ahead and heat set it. I have noticed that if I don't heat set it I still somehow get some smudging if I go ahead right into my coloring, so I do heat set my images and stamped sentiments after I have stamped them. We're going to go ahead and get started with our Copic coloring. So we're going to use Y17 and Y18. My Y17 in this instance is the darker color. So I'm going to go around the bus, just where I think the shadows should be. I zoomed in a little bit more for you guys so you could see that better. But yeah, so around the edges and where the different parts of the bus meets, like where the hood meets the bus, the bumper meets the hood, etc., and underneath the windows. And then I'm going to go back in with that Y18, which is my lighter color, and just blend out that Y17 and fill in the rest of the parts of the bus where I haven't put down ink yet. Now I do notice some smudging on my bus while I'm coloring. I'm not really sure what to tell you of how to prevent that. I heat set it, sometimes waiting a day or so after you stamp to color, or just avoid coloring over the black lines. Pretty much the best advice I can give, but it still happens and it's not that noticeable, so I don't mind. So here we're going to use R29 to fill in the lights at the top of the bus. There's just two of them that are typically red at the top and then two in the middle. Then I'm going in with YR09 for the lights that are typically orange on the bus. So we got the top, the middle, or just the top and the bottom, and then going back in with that Y17 for the yellow. Then I'm using this T2 to fill in the backs of the mirrors and then the windows of the bus. I figure it's probably dark inside, it's a dark, cloudy day, so it makes sense for them to be a bit on the darker side rather than white, um, maybe even lit up since there's people inside. But, so I just sometimes I think about it too much, but it really is you just do what makes sense to you. It doesn't have to make sense in real life. So now I'm going in with my white gel pen and I'm going over the back of those mirrors, over the windows, anywhere that I think there might be some shine despite it being a dark, cloudy day. So around the outside edges of the bus, and after all, it is still daylight even though it's storming, so I figure the bus needs some shine and it makes it look good. So that's what I do. Alright, so I used my die cutting machine, my brother Scan and Cut, to go ahead and cut this out since there's no coordinating dies, which is a-okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull that stamp set out again and stamp my sentiments. So I'm using some anti-static powder on my background panel just to reduce any static cling that there might be, um, from us blending the background earlier. And I'm using some VersaFine Clair and Nocturne to stamp those sentiments. I always feel like I get a great crisp sentiment when I use VersaFine Clair. And then I did that a few times. I didn't show it, but I did do that a few times to make sure it was nice and wet so that when I pour my clear embossing powder over it, that it sticks pretty well. Yeah, and despite doing my anti-static powder, you can see the powder's kind of clinging to some spots where I don't want it to be. So I end up doing some tapping and vigorous tapping over the edge of my desk to get the rest of that off. I also sometimes use a paintbrush to brush off the excess as well. So now I'm using my embossing tool to heat set that, and that's where all the lettering is going to become nice and shiny. And then it's really just going to pop off that background. Sometimes when I use Distress Oxide colors for my ink blending, it's best to stamp with a dark ink like VersaFine Clair and heat emboss that so that it really shows. And then here I just used a wonky stitch die to add some stitching detail around the edges of my card panel. I always think that's fun to add. And then this is the interactive die that we're going to use today to create my interactive slider mechanism. So this die, I'm just cutting out the notch from the bottom of the card panel and I'm just using some low tack tape to hold that die down and send that through my die cutting machine. And then the next part, I'm using this whole lever die from the set, as well as some other components and pieces from the die set that we're going to need, some of which I end up using, some I don't. I just kind of modify my interactive dies to what I need on my card, just because the interactive dies I'm using aren't made specifically for the certain things that I'm doing. They just need some modifications to work. So for this little piece, it's scored on the lines where I need to fold. This is what's going to hold the lever against the card panel so that it doesn't move to the left or to the right. It pulls straight when you pull on the lever. And then this is the actual lever piece, so I just fold along those score lines and then I'm going to use my bone folder to make it nice and crisp. And that's what that looks like. Next, I have this other small piece from the die set, which is going to cut on my card panel where that lever is going to go through the card panel and attach to our bus. So I'm just lining that towards the top. This is where you would want to modify based on your card. I did line up my bust and kind of make sure that it would work the way that I'm hoping it will. So that's why I decided to put it there specifically. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this around and put my lever piece through the card. And these are the pieces that are going to attach to the bus. And the bottom pull part is what's going to make the bus move. So now I'm going to put that other piece that we made to hold down the lever and put that towards the bottom to give the lever some room to move. I end up pulling it down a little bit more to give it more room. And so then it's ready to be glued onto the card. So I just slip that under the lever and then I close that up and use some liquid glue adhesive to adhere that around the lever. So here's a quick look at how that's going to work. So now I'm going to go ahead and glue my bus onto the lever. So I'm just using those two little pieces to add liquid glue adhesive. That way it gives me some wiggle room to place my bus, which I'm sorry is out of screen. And then I just hold that down for a few seconds to make sure that it stays. And then here we can see the bus moves up and down to hide that sentiment. Now it's a little rough at first, but the more that you push it and pull it, it'll get loose and it'll be much easier to pull it for the recipient. And then this little piece I had originally die cut from the black cardstock, but then decided I was going to die cut it from yellow cardstock and just use that little yellow piece. The original piece just didn't fit. Long story short, it just didn't fit. So I'm using this little yellow triangle to signal to the recipient that they need to pull that card. And there you can see it's moving a little bit better. So now our card panel is ready for our card base. So I had a sheet of 8.5 by 11 by 4.25, scored at 5.5 inches on the long side. And before I adhere it to the card, I actually did 2 layers of foam tape between the card panel we created and that black piece of cardstock that we cut out earlier. And then I did a layer of tape runner adhesive on the black. I didn't show the foam adhesive just because it was a very long and tedious process, but basically you just want to make sure you avoid the lever mechanism on the back of the card. Alright, so here's a final look at that card and how it's going to move. Using that foam tape is what's allowing me to get my finger under there to actually pull the lever back and forth. So here you can see it says the struggle is real, and struggling doesn't mean that you are failing. So I hope you guys enjoyed this card, and I want to thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.